Ji-young has been captured, but will her cooking skills be enough to sway a corrupt official and a cruel king? Let's find out in Season 1, Episode 2 of Bon Appétit, Your Majesty. How's it? I'm Evie, and welcome to After the Episode. On this channel, you'll explore unforgettable Korean dramas and anime. The epic action, wild twists, and moving moments. Let's tuck in. Ji-young has just spotted a crowd of people some distance away from the stream and gleefully waves at them, hoping for assistance. Mortified, Gilgum covers Ji-young's mouth because she hasn't spent all this time hiding from the despised Chae-hung for her to be found now. As she and Ji-young try to slip away quietly, however, they're discovered by the guards and forced to join the other women as prisoners at the governor's residence. Understandably, Ji-young has a meltdown over being kidnapped and yells for the guards to release her, but the other women tell her that screaming about it is entirely pointless. Ji-young collapses to the ground in despair at ending up in a Joseon-era prison cell, and Gilgum tries to offer her comforting words to stay strong. Instead of soothing her, it has quite the opposite effect on Ji-young, who jumps to her feet and crashes out harder than ever. Hearing the commotion, the guards enter the cell to restrain a flailing and screeching Ji-young, but she's so strong that it takes 3 guards to pry her away from the door that she's clinging onto for dear life. She's as strong as a horse, and from the previous episode, she's also as fast as one. Girl, you need to tell us your workout routine. After much effort, the guards finally manage to bind and gag Ji-young, and Gilgum gets the same treatment, guilty by association. Ji-young uses this moment of calm to try to piece together the series of events that led her here, and realizes in horror that the man she was with all day really is the king. As she contemplates making a fresh attempt at escape, the guards arrive to take them away for the selection process with the governor's son. If chosen, the women will be taken to the palace by the Chae-hung inspector and belong to the king. Luckily for Ji-young, at 27, she's considered too old to be selected, so wisely, Gilgum gives an Oscar-worthy rendition of a decrepit 28-year-old woman. A relieved and somewhat insulted Ji-young is sent with the other ineligible women to the kitchens to prepare the reception meal in honor of the Chae-hung inspector. Elsewhere, the king and his men are hot on Ji-young's trail and find her scrunchie discarded in the stream. Based on the tracks, they determine that she was recently apprehended and sent to the Gyeonggi governor's office. The king realizes with utmost satisfaction that Ji-young must have blundered right into the Chae-hung. Back at the governor's office, Ji-young's mood has brightened a bit when she sees all the wonderful brassware in the kitchen. Although the other women have already started cooking, they're just making whatever they know how to make without considering who they're making it for. To make matters worse, the kitchen maids who would have given them instructions all ran away the previous night. Ji-young and Gilgum go to the pantry to find out what sort of ingredients they have to work with, which turns out to be very little because the runaway kitchen maids took most of the ingredients with them. This is particularly bad news because they've just been told to make a meal with 9 side dishes. Ji-young makes a deal with the governor's son though. If they succeed in making a great meal, then they must all be set free. An unfortunate addendum to the deal is that if they fail, it'll mean their heads. She wants to know more about their guests, like their ages, tastes, allergies, and occupations, so that she can make the best dish for them, even though they don't have the best ingredients. The father, So-hung, has held various high-ranking positions since the time of the previous king, and the son, Sung-jae, is a childhood friend of the current king, married to the king's half-sister, and is chief royal secretary. Father and son use the Chae-hung as a weapon to ruin countless families, and the hospitality meal as a tool to humiliate their host into an ultimatum: give a hefty bribe or submit to torture. No wonder they're so buddy-buddy with the cruel king. Armed with this knowledge, Ji-young comes up with a plan and all the women in the kitchen get to work, galvanized by Ji-young's bravery and leadership. The main dish will be a French-style steak, and while the women have no idea what Ji-young means by that, they are very enthusiastic all the same. The governor's son is observing them all some distance away. While the brazen woman seemed sincere about making good food, even if it turns out badly, she'll face the brunt of the punishment, not him. He's also made sure to protect his own daughter from the Chae-hung by sending her away with her nanny. In the kitchen, Ji-young gives instructions to the other women on how to prepare the mushrooms, anchovies, and shrimp, while she and Gilgum tackle the meat, which is tough as rope. The solution for tenderizing the meat is a French method for slow temperature cooking. While Ji-young cooks in the kitchen, Mukju connives in the palace. There's still no news regarding the king's whereabouts, but Chul, her court lady, does inform her that Sungjae and Sahung have probably arrived at the governor's office. Oh, how Mukju wishes she could see the look on the proud old man's face as he witnesses his beloved granddaughter being dragged away for the Chehung. Oof, clearly Mukju is not a girl's girl. Songjae and Sahung have indeed arrived at the governor's office. The governor's son welcomes the father and son duo warmly, and they make pleasantries to his face. But when his back is turned, Sungjae gestures to his men to go somewhere. Rejoining the action in the kitchen, Ji-young works her magic on the meat. She cuts it, wraps it in kelp to tenderize it further, and cooks it in lukewarm water, which she judged to be around 50 degrees using her well-trained fingertips as a thermometer. All the women are so impressed because Ji-young is amazing. The kitchen women are having a much better time at the moment than the eligible women who have to be assessed by Sungjae. Can you imagine having to stand there and be told that you're too shy, too angry, too tall, and that your mouth is too big? Bro even told one lady she must have left her neck at home. That's nasty work. Sungjae is unhappy with the quality of women and laments that the governor's granddaughter, a noted beauty, isn't there. Back in the kitchen, Ji-young is pleased that the beef came out well, and as the last step, she sears it with rice straw just like she did in the French cooking contest. With the dish complete, the governor's son and his greedy guests make their way to the reception meal. The governor joins them at the table and inquires about the king's well-being. Sahung tells him that the king is displeased by the governor's letters, calling for Mukju to be deposed, but denies that the Chehung came to his distant domain for that reason. Right on cue, Sungjae and his father begin their planned performance of nitpicking the food served to them to humiliate the governor. Why have they been given a few measly pieces of meat when the reception meal is supposed to reflect the culture, customs, and nature of the region? Since the governor has shown them such blatant disrespect, they want him to offer them something else. Sensing danger, the governor's son tries to redirect the outrage towards the cooks and demands that they be brought before him. Unaware of their impending doom, Ji-young contemplates what to do once she's released, and Gilgam gathers up food to take with them on the journey. Suddenly, the gods burst into the kitchen and take them to the angry noblemen. While the other women beg for their lives, Ji-young notices that the noblemen haven't even touched the food, and she boldly speaks out that it's unfair to criticize a dish they've yet to taste, especially since the meal before them holds the very essence of this region's natural environment. Sungjae is amused by the theatrics, but he's brought a dramatic twist of his own. His guards have found the governor's daughter, and he proposes a deal. If the meal is to their satisfaction, then they'll leave peacefully. If not, they'll take the governor's granddaughter for the Chehung and end Ji-young's life for good measure. Smirking, they taste the meal and are immediately mesmerized by the sensational seasoning of homemade MSG. But instead of telling the truth that they enjoyed it, they say that it's no different from common boiled beef. The governor calls cap because he's tried it too and the meat is magnificent. He draws his sword in anger at their thinly veiled intentions to take his granddaughter, but his son pleads with him to calm down. The criminal cook is the one to blame, and as the guards are about to strike down Ji-young, a booming voice at the gate orders them to stop. His Majesty the King has arrived, and he wants to try the dish out for himself. This turn of events is hardly an improvement for Ji-young because she remembers all the things she did to the king, like throwing sand in his face, headbutting him unconscious, and whacking him on the head. Our girl is in mortal peril, and she knows it. They bring the meal to the king, and he doesn't think much of the simple spread before him. Ji-young hopes, however, that he'll judge her fairly since he's a famous foodie. Lucky for her, when he tries the food, he deeply appreciates her mastery of texture and savory flavors. In fact, this is the first genuine smile that he's given her. He praises her dish as the greatest taste in the land and chastises Sungjae for speaking ill of the meal. When he asks her how she came to be a cook, a traditionally male profession, she tells him that it's her calling and that she feels a particular sense of pride when an expert foodie like him acknowledges her skills. Girl is laying it on thick, and he's charmed enough by her words to want to know more about her background. So she tells him she's 27, unmarried, and comes from 500 years in the future. The look on his face. It's a rather unflattering mix of shock and pity at the clearly talented but considerably unwell woman. He decides to let her live, but keep her imprisoned at the palace along with the governor's granddaughter. And Ji-young recalls from the history books that this action sparks the king's mass execution of the officials responsible for his mother's death. They all leave the king's presence, except the governor, who rips into the king for paying more attention to women than affairs of state, destroying the lives of his officials and demeaning his subjects, which is why everyone hates him. The governor doesn't mince his words and goes on to give the king a piece of advice. Get rid of the bootlickers who thrive off his power. In an act of desperation, the governor begs the king to take his life and spare his granddaughter, but the king won't let him off that easily. He wants the governor to feel as utterly powerless as he did to protect his loved one and to live a long life of misery as punishment for bringing about his mother's demise. The governor is sentenced to exile, charged with disrespecting the king. Presently, Ji-young isn't faring any better than the governor. She's back in her prison cell with Gilgum, even though all the other women were set free. She confides in Gilgum about her identity and the magic book in her handbag that brought her here, and to her surprise, Gilgum wholeheartedly believes her. Gilgum is such a sweetheart, and we need to protect this girl at all costs. They plan to go back to the cliff and find the handbag, but first things first, they need to find a way out of their cell. The king also has a lot on his mind and is startled by Seung-jae's sudden appearance by his side. He's more at ease than we've seen him thus far and is playful with his longtime friend. They're having so much fun that you'd almost forget that Seung-jae recently kidnapped a girl and the king exiled the girl's grandfather. His mood seems lighter and he orders Seung-jae to release the other women. Well, except Ji-young and the governor's daughter, since the Chae-hung was just a front to avenge his mother. When Seung-jae points out that cancelling the Chae-hung will make the Dowager Queen suspect what the king is up to, the king believes it's too minor of an incident to make her realize that his motive is retaliation for his mother. You know, Ji-young keeps calling Seung-jae a treacherous subject, but he seems to be a close ally to the king entrusted with an explosive secret. Ji-young has an ally of her own, the governor's son, who unexpectedly sets them free. Do you think he did that to honor his word like he says, or to spite the king who stole his daughter and exiled his father? Let me know in the comments. Whatever the case may be, she lets him know that, as strange as it sounds, the tyrant will face judgment one day. Unfortunately for Ji-young, that day is not today because the king has learned of their escape from Seung-jae. As Ji-young and Gilgum walk quietly through the forest, perhaps not as quickly as they ought to be, Gilgum drops some depressing lore about herself. Her father was a military officer who was falsely accused and arrested, and when she and her mother went to look for him, they were attacked by bandits and she was the sole survivor. Ji-young vows to help Gilgum with her dream of becoming the senior court lady of the royal kitchens by teaching her how to cook. They arrive at the cliff where Ji-young last saw her handbag, but they're not alone. The king and his men have found them. He coldly demands an explanation for her treasonous act of escaping the prison, and she tells him that she came to get the handbag he shot an arrow through because it contains the Mangonruk, the magical book that transported her to this era. The book is retrieved from the tree branch, but instead of giving it back to her, the king tosses it over the cliff. Lost for good now, she has no reason to run away. What a jerk. The next day, the king is still thoroughly enjoying himself terrorizing our girls, and even Seung-jae wonders why the king is being even more vindictive than usual. Ji-young and Gilgum make a pact to always protect each other, and they'll certainly need that solidarity for whatever horrors lie ahead. Back at the palace, Prince Jae-sun informs Mukju of the failed attempt on the king's life. While the prince's focus is on investigating the man he suspected acted without their approval, Mukju should keep the king's focus on avenging the death of his mother, driving him to madness. When Mukju learns that the king is bringing a woman back from the governor's office, she assumes that it's the governor's granddaughter, a great beauty. Mukju plans on making it crystal clear to her that she's the only one for the king, and her life will be an unending misery. As they arrive at the palace, The king makes it crystal clear to Ji-young that she belongs to him and will not see anyone or go anywhere or do anything without his permission. Mukju and the king really enjoy toying with people. Maybe that's why she's his favorite. Ji-young recognizes Mukju as one of the most villainous women of her time, who had the king wrapped around her finger. Mukju warmly welcomes the king back home in a rather sickeningly sweet manner, but the king finds her little routine endearing. He's positively giddy to show her something, the ghost criminal with talents he doesn't want to waste. Since Mukju is the only other woman to have been personally escorted back to the palace by the king, she's convinced that the king is attracted to the ghost. She even volunteers to show her the ropes as a consort, but the king has other ideas. What fresh torment will the king concoct, and how will Ji-young survive in a palace full of enemies? We'll see in my next recap video in episode 3, so check it out. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.